So I think it's become pretty clear from the presentations, actually throughout the day, that consumers are becoming more empowered, more demanding. And that creates new opportunities, but also a host of new challenges. And what we're going to do in this panel session is really sort of shine a spotlight on how changing consumer dynamics are affecting our industry and what we need to do about it. I don't seem to have a clicker, so if you wouldn't mind flipping to, it's hiding. Excellent. So we're going to start off with technology. And clearly the range of enabling technologies are expanding. They're increasingly overlapping. AI is having a profound effect on just about everything. Machine learning is driving advancements in natural language processing, image recognition, speech recognition. And I've highlighted actually the ImageNet competition, and that highlights how accuracy is increasing. In the 2015 competition, the error rate was down to 3%, and it's fallen subsequently. AI is not the only technology. There's biometrics, there's augmented reality, there's virtual reality, and I've highlighted some of our VR forecasts here, where we're projecting that the installed base for consumer virtual reality headsets is going to reach 184 million by 2021. Now, what I wanted to ask the panel, with all these developments and others, we've only touched on a few, which do you think are the most important technologies and other developments that are going to change consumers' digital lives? And if we can sort of scope this as a sort of a quick fire round the panel.
Okay, hi, sorry, David Nicholl from Philips Lighting, as you saw. From my point of view, you heard the discussion about voice and artificial intelligence from Amazon. I think from smart lighting, this is one of the biggest changes from the consumer, which is going to affect the consumer lighting. And lighting actually going from the traditional lights, which are an on-off switch, to digital lighting, where it is actually providing a communication and actually a data point, which is going to enhance a consumer experience inside the home. This is one of the biggest changing, at least in my business.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Gema Esteban. I am working for Telefonica, Digital Strategy Director. And for me, there are three main technologies that are going to drive the consumer engagement and are going to really change the landscape in the future. No? One of them is wearables, and how we've seen the recent IFA in the hipster city of Judit in Berlin, how launches on smartwatches and Fitbands that can read your blood pressure from seeing the screens that are incredibly amazing will change how the consumer is going to extend the superpowers that we have, no? Extending our senses and creating superpowers. Another one is VR and AR, where Telefonica is experimenting the first contents, football matches and tennis matches with these technologies. And this, again, will extend how we even see. We are going to be able to see 360 degrees. We are going to be able to share industrial designs beforehand with customers, with providers. There are a number of use cases that I think are going to revolutionize the future. And the third one is, as we are mentioning all the time, and I will explain a little bit more, what we're doing is AI. Of course, AI is, for us as service providers, means that this is going to change how we engage with consumer, and it's going to drive efficiencies also on how we do, for example, customer service things.
Paul.
I'm Paul Jackson, Principal Analyst with Ovum in the Media and Entertainment practice. Two real areas of sort of change. In the media practice, we obviously see that TV and other content carries on growing in the manner it has been doing, but I think there's an evolutionary change that consumers will see and a revolutionary one on the technologies that we've been talking about. AI, I think, for consumers will be evolutionary. You know, get an occasional light bulb, we'll get a smart speaker, we'll start talking to Alexa, we'll be amazed that suddenly all our photos on Facebook or all our videos on YouTube are indexed with who's in them or where they were shot or when they were shot. But we're still going to be 10, 15 years away from autonomous cars. So almost counterintuitively, AI will almost be invisible to consumers, apart from when there's things like the Tay-bot that goes absolutely crazy. Whereas I look at VR and AR for Ovum, that's going to be a very visible, very revolutionary change to how we consume content and how we communicate. But as those numbers hint, it's going to take an awful long time. There's over 1 billion Android activations every year. That's the culmination of 5 years of VR sales. So we are looking well beyond that timescale before anybody's going to get money out of selling content in VR, and even further before we see anybody making money out of AR, which is probably 3 or 4 years behind that.
Okay, Judit.
So from my or the telco's point of view, what is very important to keep the customer touch point. So somehow this is why we are building on the WebRTC technology to get somehow these new innovative technologies to the end customer. Otherwise, there will be plenty of other companies independently from the telcos providing these services, as we have seen in messaging. And but somehow, in order to monetize them, we need to obtain the customer.
Yeah, now that's some good sort of insights and also some good sanity checks, and it picks up on one of the themes this morning about sort of the pace of innovation which we're clearly seeing and the impacts on consumer services and consumers in a tangible way. They're not always simultaneous, so some good sanity checks there. What we're going to do now is sort of drill down into a couple of core service areas, and we're going to start with communications. The comms industry has seen intense disruption and innovation over the last 10 years, and it shows no signs of abating. Growth in OTT messaging and VoIP continues to be very strong, as you can see by our forecasts. There's some great innovation around messaging apps in particular. They're doubling down on payments, augmented reality, video and chatbots. But clearly there are other dynamics at play in the communications market. And Judit, given your obvious affinity with the space, I wondered, some of the key opportunities you see in next-gen communications.
Well, definitely what we see from the telco side is that messaging, innovating messaging, is very difficult field to appear and to win back customers, and but it's a kind of a must-have. So what also telco standards are providing with the RCS has been happening in the internet world already a couple of years ago. So, but somehow telcos needs to catch up again. With regard to voice, there I see more innovation potential, and this is why also we believe that innovating voice and what I have presented is still not the end, because it's just innovating the way how we are using voice, but also think about other like contextual voice calling, or kind of conveying some other information like emotions in the voice calls, or any other information, personal assistant, like let's book a table, or can you send me the contact card of XYZ. So voice will remain, and the telco, like this type of communication calling experience has to be more enriched, but for that we need to keep the customer with us.
No, I agree. I mean, we can get carried away with developments around messaging for fairly obvious reasons, but there's still life in voice yet, and you're showing some really innovative services on that front. We're now going to turn to another key consumer service, and we've touched on digital assistants a lot during the day, and for obvious reasons. Digital assistants are sort of ushering in new forms of engagements. Today, digital assistants on smartphones and tablets dominate the market, but as you can see from our forecasts, digital assistants are rapidly migrating to other types of devices and platforms. And we've not even sort of mentioned connected cars there, but that came up earlier in the Alexa session. So these things are moving to other platforms. And we think that sort of service providers that can sort of join them up and offer a converged experience have a good point of differentiation. The other chart is from Ovum's Digital Consumer Insight Survey, and I think what jumps out there is consumer expectations of digital assistants are pretty steep. They kind of want these things to help control their home, entertainment, devices. They want them to manage their calendars, to anticipate their needs, and clearly some people want to marry them, so there you go. So, Gema, given what Telefonica are doing in this area, you announced Aura back at Mobile World Congress.
Yes.
How do you think digital assistants are changing consumer engagement, and sort of which particular areas are key?
Well, for us it's a little bit more than digital assistants, right? So let me say first that for me, the very key differentiator, competitive differentiator for the future in the companies are going to be customer service and the way in which every company is going to engage with their customers. There is not going to be differentiation in technology or product and services. All is about customer. This is the reason why we think AI is going to help us to really thrive on this and to really take advantage of this. And this is for three main reasons. One is because the customer digital maturity. We have been talking about this today and how the consumer is really evolving, how the consumer is more and more unloyal. They want to have experiences rather than product and services. Mm-hmm. Second is the status of the art of the AI. I am going to explain more than what, for example, our colleague on Amazon has explained on how the natural language processing is evolving, on how technology on AI is really accessible and affordable right now. And third, and for us this is very important, is our own digital maturity. Telefonica started our own digital transformation back in 2009. And this morning someone, I think that it was the CSO of Liberty Global, says that we have a huge legacy behind us. Company like Telefonica or Deutsche Telekom that were more companies than more than 100 years companies. And we started to change how our OSS, our BSS, our networks, our systems are transforming. And this is paying off now. We have more than half of our customers migrated to full stack. And this is allowing us to really put together what we name the fourth platform we launched in Mobile World Congress, which is not only digital assistant, but it's a cognitive computing platform that we are developing right now, and that will allow us, and our end goal is to really change this customer relationship. It's all about that. It's all about how leveraging the data that we have from the customers, and that of course using our main principles of transparency, simplicity and empowering, and they are opting to use the data, how we are going to train that platform, and we are going to serve them not only from the basic things like getting to know which is my invoice and which is my plan and why do I have spent this number of gigas this month, but how to really extend this to a more extending the services that we have from them. No? So for us is something that is related to, one is engagement and loyalty and really cross-selling services and growing with the customer, and another one is efficiency, because this is going to allow us, for example, to reduce the number of calls to our call centers, and we estimate that we're going to reduce that by 50%, because a huge amount of calls are very simple and are able to be solved in a very easy way in which our AI platform are going to work on that. No?
Just ask you, and the other panel members might have a view here too. Clearly digital assistants have great potential to mine customer data. In theory, with AI behind it, machine learning makes analytics more intelligent than it's ever been before. So you could see how these digital assistants could become the ultimate profiling tool.
Yeah.
Now, consumers are savvy to data privacy. So do you have any sort of measures in place or any sort of best practice in terms of, how do you best handle privacy in the digital assistant and even chatbot environment? And other panel members, if you've got views here or ideas on how we can get this right, let's bring them to the fore.
For us, and I may say that this is key, and it is very, very important to gain the trust of the customer, and everything that we're doing with them is open, and it is empowering them with the data.
Okay.
It's saying that we have this data from you, and you allow us to do this number of things. And
Transparency.
Yes, transparency is very key, I would say.
Yeah, and I would also say, I think there was a bit earlier on in the last presentation talked about the consumer wanting to be able to take himself on his own journey. What is it in for him? Not, this is our product and you must accept it. So what Philips Lighting has done is they've opened the protocol, so the API is very open, and we have 740 apps which aren't written by us. Most of them are written by the consumer. So, a consumer wants to weigh himself on a digital scale, stand on the digital scale, and it gives him a red light, a yellow light, an amber light to say whether he's, and we don't program that. Some people might think we do. Or your television set, you can actually have ambient light in the television set. You use an app and you can see the lights changing. So the whole digital assistant and the whole consumer is changing. Yes, people want, I would say we're talking about different generations as well. The generation X and Y, they really, really are worried about, my wife doesn't want Alexa in the house because she's listening, or Google Home. My son and daughter, they say to me, what did you do when you didn't have the internet, Dad? So, there's a change in behavior, and I think privacy, the younger generation, in my opinion, don't care so much, Also, just by the way, on clothes, I think I have to get more hip. Grow a beard. Philips Lighting is...
Wear a neck brace.
Yeah, well, Philips Lighting's 125 years old company, but we're an IPO, we're a 1-year-old 7 billion startup. And this is where we talk about transformation, we really have to transformation and harness this power and listen to our customer, listen to our customers' feedback, and actually make sure that we're providing value to them through whether that be digital assistants, whether it be augmented reality. It's really important that we listen to the customer and adapt and transform constantly as the consumer is adapting and transforming, and not just to say, this is it.
Good.
I'll tell you what we didn't do when we didn't have the internet is you couldn't find out whether a celebrity was dead within 1 minute of seeing them in a film. Whereas now it's just like, Alexa, is Robert Redford dead? No, he isn't.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's a lot of nuance here as well in terms of that data gathering and what people are using it for. There's a big difference between something like Philips using that to power their digital home, where consumers are getting a benefit, or Amazon using that to help develop their algorithm, and not to single them out, but Google using that to target ads. You're effectively, what benefit is that to the consumer, apart from making the internet free, obviously. People have got over that. They want something more now. What am I going to get out of all this data? And if I'm not going to get out of anything, I'm not going to give you it. So can you, as service providers, say, well, when you do this, it helps us do X, Y, and Z, and we're not going to sell you something. We're here just to try and make this more efficient for you and a better experience. And hey, it helps us out as well.
Absolutely.
What we may just one sentence here, because we know it from the telco side. We are getting so much customer information, customer data, but we are not allowed to use them, only like anonymized. And this is the kind of the way is even getting worse from May next year. So when we compare Europe versus US, Europe is very much behind all this kind of strict regulation, and we are having a much more difficult situation than all these internet services coming from the US.
Yes.
No, that's a good point. The sort of, the regulatory environment, it's being scrutinized more, putting consumers in control, recognizing nuance and different attitudes and needs and expectations of what privacy means. So really good sort of points for us to digest. And we've already started to move into the connected home, no pun intended. But we tend to talk a lot about interactive audio hubs in the connected home. Amazon Echo, these are great devices. Users love the interface. They like the idea that these units can control other devices in the home, other services in the home. But actually, if you look at our smart home device forecasts here, which are looking pretty good, it's actually security and utilities that are really driving the market. And we predict that some of the best-selling devices in those categories are smart light bulbs and smart meters, which is a great segue for David. So, given your affinity with the space, what do you think are the main sort of opportunity and challenges in the smart home and other smart places?
Okay, obviously what started to drive the utility market was a smart meter, and every house was supposed to have a smart meter, so everybody started putting in a smart meter. Security comes in two ways. I think security comes in cameras, but it also actually comes in lighting. If you ever see your house at night and there's no lights on and you try to get into your house, lighting is actually a security feature. I think the consumer, we know that the consumer wants all of these applications you saw earlier on, all the different hubs. The consumer wants these to work all together, so that if they have, I'll use some names like a Nest security camera, and it records something, you want to be able to connect it so your lights come all on the house and show that there's an intruder rather than turn all the lights off. So there has to be interaction across all the platforms. Again, the way to do this is about being open, sharing the platforms, sharing the APIs and the protocols, and obviously working with all the providers. And at Philips, we spend a lot of money in R&D working with all the big names, the Googles, the Alexas, the Apples, I hope I haven't forgotten anybody who's in the audience, but all those providers to work across. Devices are becoming more and more intelligent with the advent of the IPv6 in terms of sensors, everything having an IP protocol. And I want to move away a bit just from the smart home, because we've talked a lot about smart home, and move the consumer into the retail application where lights are actually data points, and all the lights can be connected and actually pinpoint a person in a shop, for example, up to about 30 centimeters, and even know what direction the person is. Obviously, you need a handheld device like a mobile phone. So here, we can actually work with the retail shop, providing the retail shop value, because he can pinpoint the person. He's got the data of what the customer, obviously this customer is a loyalty card customer. He's got all the data of what his previous purchases are, and can actually start to send offers to the customer. Now, we've done some surveys on this, and 8 out of 10 consumers use their mobile phone inside the retail environment. 8 out of 10 customers are actually will use their phone to seek assistance before actually putting their hand up and going and finding a human assistant, let's say. They also look at their phone for pricing information, compare pricing across the board. So this is really a technology where, interfacing between the lights, the positioning system, the data for the retail shop, and 50% of customers, of consumers, actually want offers pushed to them. So this is bringing the, let's say, online Amazon shopping experience into the bricks and mortar, bricks and clicks. I wouldn't go to say it's virtual reality or augmented reality, but it's a new type of technology which is coming into the retail shop based on Power over Ethernet, working with providers like Microsoft, Cisco's, with Philips. And the last point I want to make very quickly is smart cities. You talked a little bit about driverless cars. We believe lighting, the infrastructure of lighting, will provide the backbone of communications for smart cities. Just to give you some examples, you can put sensors in many light points. We actually have them in LA for collision detection, so that whenever there's a car crash, the emergency services come out before anybody can pick up their mobile phone and ring the services. But moving on to the future, we will see driverless cars, and we believe that this will be a positioning system to actually help with driverless cars. Not forgetting, of course, the electrical vehicle sustainability and how to actually charge them, which can be also done through lights.
Yeah, no, that was good to take the discussion out of the smart home, fascinating and the potential it has, but it is a good reminder that there are many other smart places. Now I'm going to wrap up with a sort of a question for the whole of the panel. This is data from yet another Ovum consumer survey, this time focused on emerging markets. Now in emerging markets, operators often have a pretty strong position in the market, but when we asked consumers, who were their go-to providers for digital content services, and actually digital services in general, on average, only 12% of them said operators were the key providers. So with this in mind, quick fire question, and it's actually a pretty big one. Where do you think network operators can add the most value for consumers and make the most money in what is an increasingly crowded, competitive TMT landscape?
Well, we of course, it's a, as you said, very competitive landscape, but we are working on adding more and more services, because we have one thing that is for us is gold, that is this relationship with them. We are on their home, they have our equipment there, and we are trying to build up things on top of that, saying that it's entertainment. We are investing a lot on contents, on TV contents, on VR and new technology contents around the offer. We are investing, of course, not only in the networks. That is something that is, it is for granted, but it's a huge amount of money that we put on investments year on year to upgrade the networks that everybody enjoy 300 megs on fiber at the home, as we have in Spain, for example. No? And also, smart home is strategic for us. We are building up on the equipment that we are putting on the home, so that this equipment is smart and can manage the connectivity on your home, but also security and some other services. Okay. So we are trying to defend ourselves from, of course, this crowded market, and putting services and adding services to the offer that we have and the relationship that we already have with them.
Okay. Good. Does that sort of chime or jar with other panel members?
I think the final point about well, not the final point, but being the best dumb pipe that you can be for the most cost-effective price is key. There are some service providers that will be successful in content. Typically that involves spending multiple billions on either acquisition like Verizon or football rights like BT. They will be the exception. Most operators will be completely outmarketed and outmaneuvered by either broadcasters moving into OTT or by over-the-top providers like Netflix or Amazon. I think the key role, which I agree with, is you have probably decades-long relationships with households from a data security, privacy perspective, from a virtualized service perspective. Consumers don't want to deal with 10 apps for their lights or 5 apps for AI. They want one trusted app where somebody can hold their information securely. Blockchain applications, escrow services, public-private keys, and in the smart home, be that installer or that trusted partner for the 60% of households that aren't going to wire this up themselves, even to the degree of providing security monitoring services, or if you've got one of these somewhat flaky electronic locks, the service provider has the spare key for that, if you will, and they're the only ones. So I think that area of service provision as a much more sort of universal option for service providers than going into content and trying to outplay the media firms who love service providers to bits as long as they keep their networks up, and that's about it. And that core trust you guys have that certainly banks don't have anymore, and certainly retailers and people like Google never had.
Actually, I think the trust card is pretty powerful, and other findings I didn't share, not that I want to be mean to telcos. Actually, telcos do enjoy a high level of trust with consumers. We asked them to sort of rate telcos with banks and ITT, a host of other service providers, and actually telcos did come out pretty strong on the trust stakes, so that is a powerful card to play. Now, I think we're kind of timing out. I don't know if we've got time maybe for questions from the floor. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to pose to the panel? You're desperate for your coffee or tea. Oh, there's a gentleman just over on the left.
About the AI, so you can see that working for sort of generic questions. But there's there's a whole area of personalisation which was touched on this morning. So let's say I want a bar round here for a drink after this gig, and I want a bar that I like. Now, it's very easy to serve up all the bars, all the bars that are paid for a listing or whatever, but how are they going to know my preferences versus this lady's preferences or his preferences and serve that to me?
Well, we are leveraging on something that, for example, Google does. IBM is trying to acquire by acquisitions like water companies, which is the data that we have from customers. And we are tracking and we know what they do because we have this and the network behind this. So we know very well what they do and which are the preferences. For example, when we're talking about the TV offer, we know which are the films that they are seeing, which are the things that they are choosing, how they interact with. So we have a lot of data, and this is what we're trying to put on top of the AI platform so that it learns and can answer this customization of the offer that we are building up. No? So this is the main core of the AI platform that we are building up.
Can I give another example outside the home again?
Yes, certainly.
So if you take hotels, for example, now what's happening in the hotel is that, every time you book into a hotel, you go to your room and it's the same for everybody. So the future is, in fact, in the hotel, that it'll be set up in the ambience and the atmosphere and the experience that you were used to when you last were in it. So it'll learn. So when you set the lights at this, or the TV at this, or the music at this level, it'll actually be recorded, and that date will be there, obviously, when you're okay to share it. And then when you book in again, it'll say, hello, Mr. Sorry, I don't know your name, but let's say me, Mr. Nicholl. Welcome back, and it sets everything to your settings. Lights, sound, music, whatever. So,
I think the interesting thing with machine learning there is that it works best with lots of data. So your Amazon recommendations get good quite quick. By 30th book you've bought, it knows you, apart from when you've bought them as gifts and forgot to tick that box. Things like bars, it's got a chance with. So even hotel stays, I mean, you specify that yourself.
Yeah, you specify it,
so that's easier. It's when you get to things like holidays, where you only do it once a year, it can't really say, well, the last 3 holidays he had were to North America. He must really like North America. So that's where the machine learning falls down, if you're looking for specific recommendations, rather than people who are in our industry who happen to go to an event in North London on Tuesday, all went to this bar, because there was a tab. That's where it's not quite as good. It really needs to have enough data to form an opinion, much like the rest of us do, apart from analysts.
That's a really good point, actually. So it's the sort of the pool of data you have access to, and also the quality of the data and how easily you can extract it. If you can't extract it and it's poor quality, you're not going to get anywhere. And also there's the question of consumer consent. You can have all the insights in the world, but if you don't have opt-in and buy-in consumers, you're not going to get very far. Do we have time for another question? Yes, there's a lady over here.
I have a quick question for Judit.
Oh, sorry, there's a gentleman there as well. Goodness.
I'll let the lady first.
Okay, in the coffee break.
Actually, the question is, we're talking about all advancement, in security, in expanding services to customers. I'm thinking from practical point of view as a customer. Do I really want everyone to track me everywhere? Is there going to be any button that, as a customer, I can choose? For example, if I go to brick and mortar shop, maybe I don't want them to know every my move, for example. It's kind of, I think everyone's so different. Like sometimes you just want to switch off and just be hidden in a crowded space, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
No, I agree with you. It does come back to consumer, preferences and options. And actually, telcos in the UK are pretty good when it comes to privacy, and most of them that leverage location data, they have a double opt-in. So if they're sort of using data insights for marketing purposes, you opt in to agree with that, but there's a double opt-in to leverage location data. So I think sensible service providers are treading fairly carefully around that area. So thanks to a fantastic panel.
Thank you.